All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're heading up to the north shore of Lake Superior in Minnesota to tackle one of America's most fascinating geographical puzzles. For decades, this one specific spot has totally enchanted onlookers, stumped curious minds, and fueled some pretty wild local legends. So we're going to break down exactly what this mystery is, the crazy theories that surrounded it, and how scientists finally brought the truth to light.
Section 1. The Devil's Kettle Mystery. Picture this. You're hiking down about 175 wooden steps in Judge C.R. Magny State Park. You're surrounded by this gorgeous, dense boreal forest, but, you aren't just there for the trees. You are descending to witness something that literally seems to defy the laws of nature. You get to the Brule River and bam, you're hit with this burning question. Where does half a river go? See, the river hits this massive rock outcropping and actually splits right in two. And what happens to the water on the other side of that split? Well, that's what made this spot so legendary.
What's absolutely wild here is the sheer contrast between the two sides. On the east side, you've got a conventional, beautiful 50-foot waterfall just plummeting into a pool below. Totally normal. But on the west side, the water plunges directly into a cavernous pothole, the Devil's Kettle, and it simply vanishes into the earth. No visible outlet. Just gone.
Section 2. Ping pong balls and logs.
For years, this crime scene of a disappearing river prompted some truly desperate and, honestly, pretty creative interrogations from amateur sleuths and thrill seekers. They just had to know where the water was going. People basically turned the kettle into a giant science fair project. They tossed all sorts of things into those swirling waters, fully expecting them to pop out downstream. We're talking heavy logs thrown into the current, gallons of dye poured in, and marked ping pong balls hurled right into the void. But guess what? Nothing ever resurfaced, not a single stick.
This really shows the lengths people went to. Back in 2012, a reporter named Mike Binkley actually took a ping pong ball, etched his personal phone number right onto it, and threw it into the kettle. He figured, whoever finds it floating downstream will just give him a ring. Well, he never received a single phone call. It adds such a fantastic human element to this whole ongoing mystery, doesn't it?
Because literally nothing ever reappeared, the legends just grew and grew. The most popular theory for a long time was that the water had somehow carved a secret subterranean path deep underground, carrying it miles away directly into Lake Superior. I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a fantasy novel, but without any hard evidence to the contrary, people totally believed it.
But here's the thing. Basic geology actually completely debunks this underground river theory. The rock around Devil's Kettle is called rhyolite. It's a volcanic rock that is as hard as granite. Underground waterways and lava tubes, those typically only form in much softer rock, like limestone. They just do not form in this super hard North Shore volcanic rock. So the water simply couldn't be carving a secret tunnel. It's impossible.
Section 3. Flipping the scientific switch.
Even though geologists knew the underground river theory was a bust, the mystery still persisted for decades. It actually wasn't until late 2016 that someone finally decided to treat this like a classic detective story and go looking for the undeniable smoking gun. There's this great quote from the Boundary Waters blog that I absolutely love. They said, "It's like wondering why a light bulb doesn't work but not checking to see if the switch is turned on." And it's so true. For decades, people were throwing logs and ping pong balls, but nobody had actually just sat down and measured the volume of the water entering and exiting the falls area. Finally, 3 Minnesota Department of Natural Resources hydrologists, Jeff Green, Heather Emerson, and John Libby, brought their stream gauging equipment to the Brule River to check the obvious. They set up their gear to measure the exact volume of water flowing above the Devil's Kettle and then the exact volume of water flowing several hundred feet below it.
And here is the data that broke the case wide open. Above the falls, the river was flowing at 123 cubic feet per second. Below the falls, it was flowing at 121 cubic feet per second. Now, in the world of hydrology, these nearly identical numbers are well within the normal tolerances of the equipment. So, there's your scientific proof. There is literally no loss of water. The water going into the kettle immediately resurges through submerged passages right back into the river, just a bit downstream.
Section 4. Nature's Giant Blender. Okay, so the math proves the water comes right back out. But that brings us to the next big question. If the water resurges just a few hundred feet away, why didn't Mike Binkley's ping pong ball ever make it out? Why didn't any of those logs ever float to the surface? Well, retired university professor Calvin Alexander provided a pretty visceral explanation of the extreme fluid dynamics happening out of sight inside that rock. He pointed out that the plunge pool below the kettle is an unbelievably powerful system of recirculating currents. The sheer force of the water churning inside that confined space is just immense.
Alexander suggested thinking about it like nature's giant blender. Those powerful churning waters actually act like blender blades. The pothole pulverizes logs, sticks, and yeah, definitely plastic ping pong balls. It holds them under and basically shreds them until there is absolutely nothing recognizable left to float to the surface. So the objects weren't disappearing into another dimension, they were simply being obliterated.
Section 5. The Canceled Dye Trace.
Now, even though the stream gauge data technically solved the mystery, scientists initially wanted to physically show the world exactly where the water resurfaced. They wanted that definitive visual proof. So the plan for fall 2017 was to pour a few quarts of highly visible, fluorescent, biodegradable dye directly into the pothole. Because dye molecules are so incredibly small, they wouldn't get trapped or shredded by that blender effect. They'd just flow right out with the water, painting the exact underwater exit point a bright neon green. But, spoiler alert, this highly anticipated visual experiment actually never happened.
The DNR ultimately pulled the plug on the dye trace study. Park management, including manager Pete Mott, basically decided there just wasn't a significant scientific reason to go back. The mystery was already definitively solved by the math. The stream gauge data provided all the solid proof they needed that the water was returning to the river. Because of that, pouring even biodegradable dye into the pristine state park water was deemed totally unnecessary.
And hey, for those of you feeling a bit inspired to go play scientist on your next hiking trip, please listen closely. Park safety and conservation rules mandate that the public must absolutely refrain from conducting their own dye tests or throwing any debris into the kettle. The DNR Parks and Trails Division requires really strict research permits for any kind of work like that. So let's make sure we keep the North Shore beautiful and untainted, all right?
Section 6. An Enduring Wonder.
So here we are. We've got the data, we understand the geology, and we know all about the blender effect. But does knowing that elegant scientific solution somehow ruin the experience of actually visiting this legendary Minnesota waterfall? Honestly, not at all. Like park manager Pete Mott noted, understanding the hydrology doesn't rob the Devil's Kettle of its otherworldly magic. Standing right there on the edge of that volcanic rock, feeling the cold mist on your face, and watching half a roaring river just disappear completely into the earth, it remains a profoundly surreal and beautiful experience, completely regardless of the math.
And I want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. For decades, we spun these wild, imaginative tales about underground rivers flowing all the way to Lake Superior, when all it really took was a couple of hydrologists measuring the water to find the truth. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other natural mysteries are out there, just waiting for someone with a little scientific curiosity to simply flip the switch? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today, and keep questioning the world around you.